I'd like to welcome everybody to the first Affinity 10 training workshop. My name is Nick with TDG. I thought it would be fun in our first workshop to recap some of the lessons we have had in our previous Affinity 10 lessons, such as creating a new document, placing some graphics, placing a logo, importing a color palette, creating a new color, and also placing some basic typography into our layout. On the screen right now, I'm showing the card that we will be creating in this lesson. It's a loyalty rewards card that a business can use to give to a customer to either get punched or stamped to give credit for a future order at their business. Going over the layout of this card, you'll notice we have a photo in the background of the card, our logo in the top left, some basic typography along the left, and the icon of our logo running across the bottom that would serve as the punch point or stamping point for the business. This will bring us straight into our first Toby tip of the workshop series, and Toby would like to remind us that it's very important to make sure you check with your print provider to get the appropriate margin settings and document settings to ensure that your project prints exactly as you have intended. Let's jump straight into creating our new document. I hope you enjoy this lesson, and let's get going. Right now I'm looking at my new document panel. We're going to start from scratch. I'm going to go over here to our layout tab. I'm going to change this to inches. I'm going to change my page width to 3.5, my height to 2. We're going to leave our resolution set at 300. For pages, we're going to uncheck facing pages. We'll leave our page count at 2 since we're doing a front of the card and a back of the card. We'll change our color mode to CMYK8 for printing. For the margins, I'm going to make sure our margins are linked together. And these can be pretty thin margins that I got from the printer. So I'm going to enter 0.15. Hit my tab key to apply that to all sides. For the bleed, we're going to do the traditional 1/8 of an inch or 0.125. With our new document set up, I want to make sure I save my preset. I'm going to go save preset as. And I'm just going to say US business card. I'll leave the icon set as a document icon, say OK, and we'll hit create. With our new document ready to go, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. And the first item I want to do is I want to import the color palette that we had established in a previous lesson. To do that, I'm going to go to my Swatches Studio panel, click on my hamburger icon. We're going to click on Import Palette. And we're going to do this as a document palette. Remember, the main difference between a document palette and an application palette is the document palette will only be applicable to this document we're working on currently, whereas an application palette will be available to us no matter what new document we create. So I'll select as a document palette, navigate to where your palette is located at, click open, and now we have the colors we had set up in a previous lesson. So we're ready to start our layout of our card. The first element I'm going to want to get ready to place is going to be the background photograph of the card. To do that, when I'm traditionally doing layouts, I like to use gray boxes to represent where I'm going to be placing graphical elements in my layout. Every designer is different and has a different workflow. I prefer to use mock-ups and story framing and wireframing to create a layout, and then when I get into the design application, I'll use the same sort of boxes to recreate my wireframe before going into the actual layout. So I'm going to grab my frame tool. And I know that I have the background filled with a photograph that does bleed off the edges. So coming up to our bleed line, I'm going to click and drag to fill up the entire background of the card. I'm now going to go to my properties panel for my frame and make sure it is set to scale to maximum fit. From our center anchor point, I'm going to click on Done. And now I'm going to go ahead and just fill this with a basic gray color. And this is going to be representative, at least for me, of where I'm going to be placing this photograph at. The next item I'm going to place is going to be the solid white rectangle behind the logo. Now, if you remember from looking at the sample, it had a rounded edge along the right-hand side. So to do that, I'm going to get my rectangle tool, click on that. I'm going to go ahead and select white for my fill color. And coming over to our left-hand bleed, and to where our margin is, I'm going to click and drag approximately to the size that I had for that design element. We're going to release the mouse. And now in order to round the corners of our card, we have to come up here to our corners. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I do want these to be rounded corners. However, I don't want this to be a multiple radius affecting all corners of our design. I just want this to be certain corners. So I'm going to uncheck mark single radius. And now with our single radius applied, I can go ahead and select none for the top left. For the top right, I'm going to change this to be 50%. For the bottom left, I'm going to change this to be none. And for the bottom right, I'm also going to make this 50% to give us that half circle look at the end of our shape. I can now click off of that. And the next element I'm going to add is going to be the black fill along the bottom of the card. Now, since this is a black fill, I don't want to use the traditional 000 that would be used for typography. I want this to be what's known as a rich black that incorporates all the colors to make a more solid black fill for our background. To create our color, I'm going to double click on the Set Fill option. Coming to our CMYK values, I'm going to enter 60, 40, 30, 100. Now this is what I use to define my rich black. You can also check with your printer, and there's a wide variety of different options out there for determining what rich black value you want to use in your design. But for mine, I'm going to stick with the 60, 40, 30, and 100. I'll now say close. And now I want to go ahead and add that color to our color palette. So to do that, I'm going to click on our Add Current Fill to Palette. And now we have that color here available to us. To create our rectangle, I'm going to get our rectangle tool, click on that, and approximately drag out the size I want that shape to be. So we'll start with right around there, and I'll increase the height of that by clicking on my direct selection tool and dragging this up just a little bit to give us a little bit more room to work with along the bottom. Now with these three elements in place, I'm now going to add the frames for the icon of our logo. To do that, I'm going to get our frame tool, click on that, and I know we have these going across the bottom of our layout, so I'm going to click and hold, and as I drag out, the keyboard shortcut for you is you can press left or right on your arrow key, and you'll notice when I press right on my arrow key, I'm populating more frames for my layout. If I press down on my arrow keys, I get another row. So up and down, left or right, to add frames as you need to. And this is just a convenient way to add several frames at once into our layout. Now we know we have 5 punches on this card, all across one row. Holding down my Shift key to get a perfect square, I'm going to drag out an approximate shape that I want and a size, and then release the mouse. So now we have our 5 frames to work with. Let's work on repositioning those on our page. I'm going to click on our first one, drag it up within the margins. Come over here to our next one, bring it over here to our margins. And I apologize, I realize the black is making it difficult to see the frames. I'm going to click on all of these now. And coming up to our align option, I want to align all of these vertically. And I also want to distribute these across from left to right within the selected boundaries. So to do that, we select them all, and we go ahead and click on to distribute. And now this will space our boxes out evenly, so we're ready to place our graphical elements. But before we place that, let's come up to our properties panel. And we're going to go ahead and scale to minimum fit on this one because I want to ensure that none of the icon is cropped off when we place it into the frame. If I do it to maximum fit, some of the sides or the top and the bottom might be cropped off depending on how it fits within the frame. This will ensure by doing scale to minimum fit that it fits perfectly as we want. And I want it to be to the center. And we can go ahead and select done. Now to place our first element, I'm going to click on my frame. I'm going to go up to the File menu, press Place, and navigate to our icon. Click on Open, and our first icon is placed. Now I'm going to do this several times over again to get the other 5 in here. You can also just create one frame and then duplicate that frame several times across, as many times as you need, and distribute the widths accordingly, just like we did with the frames only. But I wanted to show you the shortcut for creating frames. That's why I elected to do it this way. I'll go ahead and click on Replace Image. Once again, selecting our icon. And do this one. And one more. Okay, so right now our card is looking off to a good start. We have the punches of our card set in place within the margin area. I can also drag this up to make a little bit more room for the text we still have to implement. Now the next step is I'm going to add in the logo that overlays on top of this white shape. To do that, I'm going to press my keyboard shortcut, get our logo, click on that, and now I'm going to click and hold and drag to get the approximate size of the logo that I want. Now you can also place a frame first and place it within that frame, or you can click and drag and size it afterwards. Once again, I want to ensure that the logo stays within the margin area for printing. Now we can click off of that, and we have the foundation of our card set, and we're ready to now insert the background graphic. So I'm going to click on our gray square that we had set in here. We're going to go up to Replace the Image, and we'll navigate to where our photograph is, and I'm going to use this one. Click on Open, and it places that into our layout. Now, if you remember from our previous Affinity 10 lesson where we looked at placing photographs and how we can resize the photographs in our layout, I'm going to come to our bottom slider here and make this a little bit larger and more prominent to fill up the space. So I'm going to drag that to the right, and we'll go ahead and click off of our image. And now I'm going to go ahead and move this over a little bit to the right. So I'm going to click on our Move tool here in the middle after we click on our picture and slide it over a little bit. And now we almost have the front of our card layout ready to go. The next item we're going to add is going to be the typography on the front. And anytime we're placing very basic typography, 1 or 2 lines of text, I tend to use the basic artistic text tool versus the frame text tool. The artistic text tool is the one right here below our table tool. I'm going to click on that. And while we haven't discussed using either of these tools yet in the Affinity 10 courses, we'll go ahead and click on it. And then with the artistic text tool, we can click and hold and drag to the size of the text that we want, which is very handy when working with just a little amount of text. I can release my mouse. And now we're going to go ahead and type in our text. Once we have our typography set and our text is selected, we can then come up here to our properties panel for our text. I'm going to click on our drop-down menu. I'm going to start typing the font that I'm looking for. There we go, Montserrat. Click on that. And now we're going to change this to be a boldface. And we'll resize it a little bit so it's not quite so large. And right about there looks good at 14 point. And now we have to color this orange for our brand. So we'll come over here to our Swatches Studio panel and we will click on our orange color. And now we can reposition this in our layout to go up against our left-hand margin. So I turn off our preview lines. We have the front layout of our rewards card completed and ready to go. I'll go ahead and turn back on our preview mode. And now we'll jump down to page 2 of our layout. The back page of our layout was the reverse side of the card, and you can reuse the reverse side of your loyalty card for a wide variety of options. You can keep it very basic like we're doing, with just inserting another variation of the icon logo. You can also treat it like a business card and enter your contact information along the top. You just want to make sure if you do that, you don't enter it along the bottom where that information will get punched through. But that also gives your clients another business card that they can reference when trying to contact you as well. So it can serve a dual purpose that way. To fill our background, I'm going to get our rectangle tool, click on that, and we'll drag out the back of our card. Remember, since this is bleeding on all 4 sides, we want to ensure that our shape touches the bleed line of our layout. With our shape still selected, I can come up here to our swatches panel and change this to our orange color. And we're going to go ahead and now place our other icon for the back of the card. And to do that, I'm going to get our rectangle frame tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and hold down my shift key, drag out a basic square, go up to replace image. And I'm going to go to where our logo is. And in this case, I want the variation logo. That's the white version. Click on that. And now we're going to change the properties of this frame since we forgot to do that as soon as we put it in. So if that happens, we simply go up here to our properties panel. And I want to scale to minimum fit. That way it fills up the entire shape. Go ahead and change our registration point to the center. Click on done. And now I want to resize this to take up a lot more of the back of the card. Now we can, from a previous lesson, click on the corner and drag, holding down our shift key to keep it in proportion. If we want to do it that way, you can also come down here and click on our lock aspect ratio and type in a value. So I could type in 3, for example, and it'll scale it up accordingly. Or you can also, if you're just wanting to scale it up by a certain percentage, I can go ahead and type in 300%, click enter, and now we have a larger version of our logo that we can work with and reposition on our page. To reposition it, I'm just going to grab it and drag it across our layout. Now this is a little too large here, so let's go ahead and scale this down a little bit more. Drop it down to about 3.5 and reposition it. And I think that looks pretty good right about there. I want to make sure the fork bleeds off the page and leaves a little room up here in the corner for the circle part of the logo. So now if I hide our preview, we have the background of our card placed and the icon. Now I want to make this a little bit transparent. I don't want it to be solid white. If we did want to leave it that way, we'd leave it exactly as it is and it would be perfectly fine. I want to treat this more like a watermark, in which case I'm going to make sure my layer is active. I'm going to change our opacity down to 15%. And that's going to give it the watermark look and also help with the branding of our card when we give it out to clients. The last step of our layout is there is a part of the card you could not see on the demonstration I showed you earlier, and we had just some basic typography running along the right-hand side here. So once again, I'm going to get my artistic text tool, click and drag out some text, and say mysite.com. We'll go ahead and change that color to white, and we'll make this font Not quite as heavy. We'll go ahead and make it a light font weight and drop the size down a little bit. And also I want to go over here and change this to be aligned to the right because I'm going to be flipping this vertical. When I click on it, you'll see if I hover over top of our anchor point here above our text, it changes our arrows to a double-headed arrow. Now if I click and hold and drag, we can rotate it, and holding down the shift key will help it lock and snap into harder positions like a 45 degree, or in this case, a 90 degree. I can now release the mouse. I want to make sure we go ahead and reactivate our preview mode so I can see the margins. And we'll tuck this along the top right margin. And we'll make the font a little bit smaller here. And of course, depending on the size of your domain name, you may have to adjust the size accordingly. I'll leave it set as a 10-point font. And we have our layout complete. So if I hide our preview mode, there we have the back of our card on page 2. And on the front of our card, we have our punch spots, our text, our logo, and our background graphic. We'll go ahead and save this. We'll do File, Save As. And I'll make a new folder for this. I'll just call it Loyalty Reward Card. If I could type, that would help. Double click on that. Name our file. And click on Save. Now that we have our card designed, it's important we take the next step to get it ready to print. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is actually package this design. And we haven't discussed packaging yet. What packaging does is if you have your images set to embed or linked, the linked images will then be put into a folder for future reference later. A lot of times, if you're working quickly, maybe you're downloading assets for a project and maybe you leave them in your downloads folder or you put them on your desktop, you forget that you put that there, and then you go to save your file. Maybe a week or two later, you delete some of those files while you're cleaning up some of your folders, and then that image or that asset is gone and you have to re-download it or re-find it again. By packaging our design, we can ensure that those assets are all gathered in one location, so we keep them and have them to use later. I'm now going to go up underneath File, Save as Package, and it says this document contains one or more restricted fonts. Please ensure that you comply with copyright. You'll see this upon any time you want to package a document. We'll go ahead and click Close. And now it's going to let you know what is going to be packaged together. Now, when setting up this document, I traditionally worked with linked assets. I forgot to do that, and these are now embedded images. So I do have options to include the images. If this was a linked asset, you would see underneath the images, it would say linked, and it would have a couple representing our logos that we have placed in our design, as well as our background graphic. I'm going to say OK. And now we'll navigate to our folder. We'll go ahead and find our folder here. I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to make another folder, and I'm going to call it Loyalty Package. And this is different from InDesign, where InDesign will automatically make the package folder for you. In Affinity, you have to make the package folder yourself. I'll double click on it, and then I'll say Package. And that quickly, if you go to look at your folder, let me see if I can find that folder here. Give me a second here to browse my folder here. It's on my other screen. I'll drag it over here. So here we have our loyalty reward. Here we have our loyalty package. And if I double click on that, you'll now notice here we have our file we can work with, the fonts that were in our document that were not protected. And our images folder is empty since we did not have those linked to package the linked images. However, if we had to set the linked, it would pull all of those images into this folder to ensure that you don't accidentally delete them if you downloaded them quickly just to work yourself through a project. Now we'll go ahead and close out of this. And the last step we have to do is actually get this ready to print. So depending on how your printer wants the file, most printers want the bleed included, but not the crop marks. So it's important to check with your printer before submitting your file so you know how to export it so it is optimized for their production process. I'm going to go underneath the File menu. We're going to choose Export. Bring this over here onto this screen. And now we're going to change this to say PDF. In our PDF presets, we have a wide variety of options. We want to make sure we choose Press Ready. The DPI set at 300. I do want all pages in this case. Now, depending on how your printer wants the file, you may have to export pages 1 and 2 separately. So if you have to do that, you just enter pages 1 and 2. In this case, I can just leave it as one file for submission. So I'll just leave this set as all pages. Working our way down through the settings, you'll notice here we have our include bleed check mark. You want to make sure this is check marked. If it is not by default, that's going to put the bleed on the file that we need for them to cut the card to ensure that we have no white edges. And for the fonts, I like to change it from embed fonts to text as curves. This ensures that any font we use is automatically converted to a shape, so we don't have to worry about running into possible font issues when submitting our file for printing. Scrolling down through, you can also require a password to open if you want to protect your files, or require a password for modification and for printing. I'm going to leave both of those unchecked for this demonstration. We're going to click on Export. It's going to ask you where you want to export your file. I'm going to go back to our root level. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this Production Files. Double click on that. I'll change the file name. I like to put the size of the document on the file name. And click Save. It's going to go through and export your file. If you're working on a very large file like a publication, this could take a minute or so, depending on the speed of your processor and the power of your computer. So be patient with that when you are exporting larger projects. And once your project is exported, we can jump back in, look at our production files. Here's our PDF. We can double click on that. And now we can see our file is ready to go. If we hover over top of this, well, I guess let me say I can see that it's ready to go. Let me drag this over onto the other screen here. Here we go. Now we take a look at our file. We can see it's ready to go. Both pages of our document are in place. And as a check, we can hover down here to the corner and see that our document size is 3.75 by 2.25. And that ensures that the bleed is in fact on our file when we exported it. Now you can submit this to your printer to have it produced. I'd like to thank you for joining me on the first Affinity 10 workshop session. I hope you enjoyed it. I realize I probably moved fast through a little bit of the sections, but I also wanted to get straight to the point to help you move along and move forward in your creative process and with learning the application. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you in the next session.